Let's flavor some ciders.
4 ways.
So we did a basic cider and we finished it 4 different ways. We carbonated it, made it sweet, made it dry, all that kind of stuff. So today what we're gonna do, I remade that cider in a 1 gallon. We have 4 mason jars with airlocks affixed. Yeah, put an airlock on it because otherwise you never know. And we're going to flavor this 4 different ways. Now I'm not gonna carbonate any of these or anything fancy like that. They're going to stay dry, hopefully. I'm not doing things that will necessarily alter the ABV, but should alter the flavor and possibly the color, depending. And some of this might take a little while. But the first is I'm going to add dried elderberry. Now, dried elderberry can have kind of a licorice-like flavor. These, for some reason, they remind me of dried blueberries. I really get, it's a little more earthy than a blueberry, but it's very similar to a dried blueberry. So, really simple. I have my full mason jar. I have 25 grams of dried elderberries, and I'm dropping them in. Most of them.
There's a few guys that stuck.
Yeah, a couple didn't make it. Everybody in. And they should sink. They might not. It's okay. Don't get freaked out if they don't. I will probably have to give this a little bit of a shake every once in a while to keep them going. And I'll let that sit for a couple of weeks and extract those flavors. Now what's gonna happen is they're gonna soak up that cider and expand a little bit. By the way, this is a pretty much 6.2% apple cider, no extra sugars or anything added to it. It was just the apple juice that we used in our basic cider, yeast, I don't even know what yeast I used, probably like a 71B or something simple, and there was some fermented O, so a little bit of nutrient. It fermented out dry. I tasted it beforehand. It's a decent cider. It's about a month old, so it's still kind of young. But anyway, there we go. Elderberry, 1 flavor down. The next flavor, a lot of people wanted me to do oaking, and well, we have started oaking more recently. Ken from Barrel Char Wood Products has sent us a bunch of things, and today I'm using Amberana Medium Toast. Why? Because it was the one that I closed my eyes and reached in the bag and grabbed.
I believe this is one of his newer varieties that he's offering. And when Brian, he did that. He's really enjoying the aroma. So we're very hopeful this is going to be a yummy brew.
It's a smoky, sweet thing going on. It's like, if you watched our review of some of their stuff, the sugar maple, it's what I expected the sugar maple to smell like. So that tells you something. And all I do is I take a mason jar, I put the stick of wood in there, I add some boiling water, let it sit for about 5 minutes, and then it is sanitized and some of the tannins get pulled out just so that it doesn't overwhelm. And then I take the stick out, it's a little bit warm, drop it in, and I'm gonna put the lid back on. And that also will sit for a few weeks to maybe even a couple of months. I'm not sure yet. It's going to be a smell thing. Every once in a while give it a smell, but I am gonna have to keep this wet as well. Even though the wood will wick the liquid up, it probably should prevent anything untoward happening. But I believe this cider is fully degassed at this point, so there's really not a lot of gas in here to come out to save anything. Ooh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is a little bit. It does look like there's a little bit of gas. Okay, cool. Let me push that all the way in and do that over here too. There we go.
I may have overfilled these airlocks. We don't typically use these because Brian
I don't like them.
really enjoys the little bloop bloop that you get from the S-Style.
I just don't like these. There's nothing wrong with the 3-piece airlocks. Many people love them because they're easier to clean, this and that. I just, from an aesthetic point of view, like the S airlock better. That's all. That's all it comes down to. For the next one, I'm going a little bit more traditional. Going with 1 cinnamon stick, 1 cardamom pod that I've slightly bruised and opened, 5 allspice berries, and 1 clove. Now, if you are curious, that sounds like a lot of spices for a quart of cider, and you'd be right. But I don't want to have to let this sit for a very, very long time, so I want to speed it up a little bit. But we are going to have to check this every few days to see if it's extracted enough.
It's also very difficult to get the flavor profile that you want in such a small volume. So ideally, we want to be doing this in at least a gallon of each of these, but that would be an awful lot of cider for just 2 of us to do a test on. So that's why we
Exactly.
did this. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with doing little experiments like this on a quart or even a pint if that's what you have available. Because this way you can try things and combinations and see what you like. And that's the beautiful thing about cider and mead and wine and even beer to some extent. You can do a finished product and then afterwards do some of these flavor combinations and play with it a little bit. Make it something unique, something different. And that way, if you decide, okay, I really like this or I really like this, you can also make a 5-gallon batch of a basic cider and then flavor it 5 different ways into 5 gallons and have 5 different things. The last, and to some arguably best, to me I'm not sure, I'm going to dry hop this one. I have a love-hate relationship with hops, okay? If you remember from anything that we've done with gin or gin-like flavors, pine is not really my favorite thing, and a lot of hops taste like pine. It just really isn't such a thing for me. I know somebody's gonna argue and say that they all don't taste that way. I know. But still, it's not my favorite thing. It's one of the reasons I'm not a big IPA fan. Today we are using Cascade pellets. Yeah, and I looked this up and the recommendation was 3 ounces of pellets for 5 gallons of beer for dry hopping for 48 to 72 hours. Well, I know that a quart is 1/4 of a gallon and 1 gallon is 1/5 of 5 gallons. So I just did some math and came out with 4 grams of hops dry hopping. Really simple. I'm just gonna take those and drop them in.
The recommendation for dry hopping was anywhere from 48 to
72 hours.
Yeah.
So 2 to 3 days, which is probably pretty good because I think the spice one might be ready in about the same amount of time. The berries and the wood probably need a couple of weeks. So we'll just keep an eye on these and we'll fill you in. But it's really interesting to see.
Look at the berries already.
Yeah, the berries are already changing the color. The wood is actually slightly different now too. It's just really interesting to see how that occurs. And this is the really cool part about homebrew is making it your own. If we decide that the hops and the wood were good, maybe put them both together next time. Or maybe elderberry and the spices. Or some other dried berry. Why did I use elderberry? Someone's gonna ask me.
It's
you know
because
why?
what we had.
Yeah, I thought I had dried blueberries. Nope, we didn't have any dried blueberries, so I had dried elderberries. Instead, I went with them. Why did I use Cascade hops? Because that's the hops that I happen to have on hand. The wood I already explained. And the spices, well, those are typical apple pie spices. So it's kind of like an apple pie cider kind of thing. Just thought we'd give you a nice idea of how you can flavor your ciders. Now, that said, you can experiment with this to your heart's content. You can try a million different flavor combinations. And honestly, I'd like to hear what you guys come up with. So leave a comment below letting us know what flavor combination you did. And
An additional note about doing combinations in this volume, because you have such a small volume of liquid to ratio-wise a rather large volume of flavorant, you want to keep a close eye on these and check them daily to see how they're coming along. You may find, yeah, that it'll just go pew and go way too far into the flavor profile.
Especially this one and this one.
Yes.
Those are the two that will overdo very, very quickly. Hops can become a very, very powerful flavor.
And I'm having some concerns about this one. I mean,
wow, it might be done already. I mean, it's been like 5 minutes and yeah, it's already colored it and everything. So you already see how different the outcomes can be based on that. Okay, so 2 days have gone by and well, the hops is done. I want to remove it from the cider, but in order to do that, I have to remove the cider from the hops. It smells a bit like beer, which is, you know, understandable because it's hops. So here's the thing. There's a lot of ways to do this. I'm gonna do it the most expedient method, which means I'm gonna pour it. Some people are really gonna hate hearing that, but this is only a quart. If I try getting a siphon in there, I'm afraid I'll probably make more mess and waste more than if I just poured it. Granted, there is some risk here. Okay, just so you know I am taking a risk of vinegarization and possible oxidation because this is a lowish ABV, so it could turn to vinegar. Do I really think it's going to? Probably not. Also, I believe this will be consumed within 1 month. Therefore, the likelihood slim to none. So, not really all that worried, but I'm going to still be very, very careful. To do that, I have a mason jar here. Sitting in, it's not really turbos, it's just our pitcher filled with star sand fluid, and I'm just gonna let that drain a little bit. Then I have a strainer bag, which is really used for making like nut milks and things like that, but it's a very, very fine mesh, and that's why I chose it, because I think the hops might cause a bit of a problem. They're gonna wanna come through almost anything that I put this through, like cheesecloth, I don't think would be fine enough. So really, really simple. Put it there, put this over the top, open it up a little bit, remove the lid, and very carefully, so as to not introduce more oxygen than necessary, pour this through. And we have all the hops in the bottom, a few pieces in the filter bag here. And as I lift it up and out, it should be relatively clean. That worked pretty well. Like I said, smells like a beer. So I think 48 hours was plenty for that amount of hops in this dry hopping situation. And we'll be back in a few more days to take the spices out of the spiced version. Derek is back. So today we have our spiced cider, and it's been sitting on those spices for 7 days. Time to take a little taste of it and see if it's done, because spices can over extract and get kind of nasty. So right off the bat, it smells perfect, like just right. I'm just gonna pour a little bit off here. Just a quick sample. That was more than I really meant to pour.
More for me.
Ooh, that is really interesting. I like it. Wow. Fruity and spicy. It's like apple pie. It really is. That's lovely. For a dry cider with spices in it, that's really lovely.
It actually reminds me of spiced apple yogurt. If you ever had spiced apple yogurt, it's delicious. It was my favorite. Okay. And that's what it reminds me of.
I've never even heard of such a thing. Anyway, now we have all these spices to get out of this. Actually, we're gonna do it the other way around. We're gonna get the cider out of the spices instead of the spices out of the cider. So what I have here is a nut milk bag, and I put it into a clean mason jar. Everything has been sanitized in turbos, and again, if this is going to bother you, look away, pretend I used a siphon, all right? I'm going to pour this because it's such a small quantity, and honestly, for this test, I'm not that concerned about it. This stuff is not gonna last that long. I plan on drinking this when this test is over. So I'm going to pour it. I'm just gonna pour very carefully, right through the nut milk bag into the mason jar. Then just pull out the bag. Get every last drop. Stick it back in there to get cleaned up. Putting the airlock back on. It's a safety precaution. Probably isn't necessary at this point, but I like to. There's a little bit of airspace in there. Now, you might have noticed the elderberry and the one with the wood are still going, and there's a good reason for that. The elderberry, I think, needs just a few more days, although it's like black, okay? It's totally dark. The wood, though, I'd like to give them 3 to 4 weeks just to give it a real fair shake. On a cider, probably doesn't need more than that because it's a lighter flavor to begin with, so I don't want to overpower. But yeah, maybe the next installment will be taking the elderberries out, and then after that you'll see the wood, and then we're gonna do a full tasting of all of them. All right, we've let these go as long as I care to. There's only 2 left. First is the one with the Amburana wood in it, which smells like French toast, okay? It just really does. Vanilla and cinnamon. This one's pretty simple. Just take the wood out. No big deal. But I'm gonna save this wood because it's good wood. And while we're at it, we'll just replace the cap. Don't need airlocks anymore. These are degassed, they're fine. We're just gonna store these in mason jars. People ask all the time, can you store it in mason jars? As long as it is absolutely, positively not going to ferment and there is no carbonation, yes, there's no reason not to. Mason jars are not known for holding carbonation. Another question we get asked all the time is how many times can you reuse that wood? Well, there's no real true answer to that. Sometimes only once, sometimes twice, but depends how often you want to push it. I mean, if you want to go further and get 3, 4, 5 tries, go for it. As you put it into more brews, it loses a little bit of potency and it picks up other flavors from that brew. So, like, if you made something really spicy and you didn't want the next thing to be spicy, you might not want to use it in that particular brew. But when they're complementary flavors, there's nothing wrong with it. Then we have the elderberry version. Now, you might notice that this one is just a little bit dark.
It's super dark.
Yeah. It's amazing. Smells incredible. And we have the now familiar bag over a mason jar because I'm just not going to siphon this. It's a quart. These things are going to be gone within a week. I'm not really worried about oxygenation at this point. However, if that bothers you, please don't do this at home. And you might even want to look away for about the next 20 seconds. But this is why I did it this way, because you just do that, pull the bag out, let it drip a little bit.
Now, if you couldn't tell by the glistening of the bag when we had it in there, I did go ahead and sanitize that bag prior to this process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All the lids, everything, it's all been sanitized. Even my fingers were sanitized when I stuck them in to get the wood out. I mean, yeah, it's just what we do. Speaking of, I'm gonna wash my hands and sanitize them again. At this point, I can replace all these airlock lids with regular lids. We're getting ready for the tasting part. And one thing I want to say about this too is this is just 4 suggestions for how to do this. The possibilities are absolutely endless. Can you change out for different berries, for different fruits? Absolutely. Dried fruit, frozen fruit. You can even use concentrate if you really want to. Just be wary of re-fermentation. I try to keep everything on an even keel, keeping it all dry. That way, when we do the tasting, it's not like one is super, super sweet and the next one's really, really dry because, well, the sweet one's just gonna taste better. That's just the way it is. So we wanted to, more or less have an even playing field. So we have our glasses and we're just gonna go through and give quick tasting notes on each one. Do a little pour here. There's probably a perfect order to drink these in too. We have spices, hops, amberana, and elderberry.
I have no idea.
Not sure that the spices one should be first. Hops should probably be first because it'll clean your palate slightly. And I'm spilling. Of course I'm spilling. I'm pouring from a mason jar. But I think the amberana and elderberry should probably be the last ones. Because I think they're going to have the strongest flavors. The amberana might not be that strong. Don't know. But let me get the bottles out of the way so you can see these guys. Because that's.
Just need to know what order we're in for.
Yeah, that's why I did this. We have spices, hops, amberana, elderberry.
Well, we obviously are going to know which one this one is.
I think we're just going to leave it that order. Yeah, well, the elderberry is obviously the dark one, if you didn't know. But anyway, let's start with the spiced. Ooh. Smells a lot like my metheglin.
Yeah,
actually.
So if you know Brian's wheelhouse, he will happily stop at this one.
I don't know. I'm going to like the amberana too, I think.
I'm still going with it smells like spiced apple yogurt.
Yogurt?
If you aren't familiar with spiced apple yogurt, then you won't understand what I mean. But
that is why I don't understand.
The fruit on the bottom version and the spiced apple concentrate part that you mix into the yogurt itself smells like this, or at least my memory.
So basically, it's like apple pie.
Yes.
Okay. It's the yogurt part that's throwing me. I'm like, there's no yogurt.
Memories. They're a thing.
Okay. That's quite nice.
Kind of takes me by surprise because the memories that I'm invoking are rather sweet. And so when you first get that, you don't get sweetness as your first impression. And so it's kind of like, whoa. But then you're like, oh, wait, yeah, there's the apple notes and there's the spice notes and everything's wonderful.
It's like apple pie spiced apple cider. I mean, it's quite nice.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, this stuff is only like 16 days old. In total, all of this stuff is only 16 days old. And it sat on the spices for like a week. It was just enough. There's a hint of spice there, but it's not overpowering. I actually taste the apple and all the spices. If it didn't have any sweetness, I think the spices might be too overpowering, but there's just a touch of sweetness there.
Yeah.
So I actually really like it. That's nice. Chilled over ice.
Oh,
that
yeah.
would be,
It would be
lovely.
a lovely hot day beverage.
All right. Since this isn't a scientific test, we're not going to go cleansing palates and all that kind of stuff. We're just going to go on and taste the next one. Now, this is the one that was dry hopped. So it'll be more reminiscent of a beer than a straight up cider.
It does smell
But
like
it's not overpowering.
It smells like a beer cider hybrid rather than
Yeah.
full on beer or full on cider.
Which is kind of the idea. Definitely smell the hops and like a green apple smell.
Because the hops have that strong bittering, because that's what they're for a bittering, I'm getting that kind of lingering on my tongue, which when I first drank it, I'm like, oh, this is a lot better than I was anticipating it going to be. But then I was like,
it's a little astringent.
if there was a little bit more sweetness in this particular one,
Yeah, or if
I think
it was cold.
would balance out better.
I think cold, this would be refreshing and nice and crisp.
But I think if you liked beer,
Yeah, if you're a beer drinker and you like hops, that's the way to go.
that would be a cool combination for you in cider form.
Definitely gives a beer feel with that apple
Yep.
coming through at the end. Really, really cool stuff. All right, I have high hopes for this one. This is Amburana wood, which as soon as it was mentioned to some people, they like lost it. They freaked out because they thought it was the most awesome thing. We've never actually tried it before, so this is our first try. On the smell, this smells just like my French toast, which is vanilla and cinnamon. It smells very sweet, which is a little deceiving because I don't think this is going to be overly sweet. Wow, that is really good.
There is a lot going on in that. It's
Oh my God.
far more complex in flavor than something you would imagine as just a pretty generic cider with some wood stuck in it, right? It's got smoky notes, it's got almost bacony notes, it's got...
See, I'm getting French toast.
He's still stuck on French toast.
I'm getting apple, cinnamon, vanilla. Yeah.
It's very nice, and I'm still thinking about it. You know, I got that glazed over look, I'm sure, where I'm just like, oh, what else? How else can I describe this?
That's probably my favorite so far, though. Yeah.
I think if you combine
Oh,
those
yeah.
two,
Oh, well, we're probably gonna. Okay, and now on to the elderberry. This is obviously the black sheep of the group, no pun intended. But it colored it that way within 24 hours.
I did.
It was black,
It did.
like almost
boom.
instantly.
I was so excited.
On the smell, it's fruity, like a dark fruit, like a dark plum. But I get a hint of that licorice too. Not a lot, just a hint of it.
I'm almost getting
All right, I'll taste it.
kind of like a raisin note, like a dried fruit note.
Oh, wow. Changed the flavor completely. It's like appleberry now. It's really, really good. You wouldn't necessarily think of it as cider. I think of it as a wine.
Yeah.
It comes more across like a wine than a cider. Very cool.
It almost feels petulant. I know it's not, but I got that sensation from
Petulant means mildly carbonated.
Yeah, sorry. I got that sensation from something else that we tasted recently, and I don't remember what it was, but it's kind of like a tingling on my tongue. And it might just be my personal reaction to elderberry. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not getting any.
But tactile-wise, I got a different sensation from that than I did the other ones. And now we play Mad Scientist.
This was Mad Scientist all along. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I combined the spiced with the Amburana. because I think that's going to be the winner.
Yeah.
Oh, and the smell, it's amazing. Just save me some. Yeah.
I'm gonna let him get the first sip in there so I don't over sip. Now remember, you just came off the elderberry, so.
Yeah, I know. I think it weakened both too much. I think had I spiced it and oaked it at the same time, it would be stronger on each. Because what happened is you get half the oak and half the spices, and it just kind of made it a little less than.
Still good though.
Yeah. Well, now we got these two we have to mix.
The hops and the.
Why not, right?
Well, there's a little tiny dribble in there. Throw
Yeah,
that
I'm
one
gonna
in
drink.
there.
No, I'm drinking that.
You drinking that one? Okay, then I'll drink this. I'm trying to self-cleanse my palate.
Self-cleansing your palate. See, elderberry's kind of earthy already, and the hops with the cleansing astringent effect might actually be a nice combo. Wouldn't be my favorite choice.
No, it kind of reminds me of coffee.
It went a little,
Almost.
it feels drier.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, all these were dry. These were totally dry. Okay, my least favorite would be the hops and the elderberry and hops together. Then elderberry, then the spiced, then the Amberana. I think the Amberana was my favorite one. And I really think that if I had done spiced and Amberana together, that would be a winner. With a little bit of sweetness in there, that would be amazing. Not even much, just 4 or 6 points of sweetness would really change that. What was your...
I agree. I think oaking the spiced cider would be really nice, particularly with the Amberana. And I feel overall, from my personal taste preferences, just a little tiny bit more sweetness would.
Yeah, well, I did these dry on purpose.
Right.
But as far as flavorants for cider compared to the original cider,
I think they all.
We have the original. Would you like to taste that?
Sure.
Give me a moment. All right, so this is one of the. Ooh, had a little bit of petulance there apparently. This is the still and dry version, so this doesn't have any flavorants added. And I use the exact same recipe to make these. So it's the same thing. This one's just maybe another month or two older. So it's got slight age to it. And apparently a touch of carbonation. Smells young.
I like that one too.
Oh yeah,
I think the fruit
tastes much better than it smells.
The fruit comes forward more on that one, which
definitely more
makes
apple.
more sense because that's all that's in there, really. I like them all. I'm having a difficult time.
Neither of us are really a huge fan of hops, so that's why the hops was kind of on the downside there. I do think that the plain was better than the hops. Other than that, I think they all improved it in some way. That would be my assessment. Even the elderberry and hops mixed together was on par with just the straight, in my opinion, if I was going to put scores on them all.
So why did we make this video? Well, we wanted to show you that you're only limited to your imagination on how you flavor your brews.
And what you can put your hands on.
As long as you have a stable base that you know isn't going to continue the fermentation process, then you can pretty much add to it whatever you like. Just remember, based on what you choose, the time will vary on how long you want to steep it.
Yeah, that's why every one of ours took a little bit different time. And I probably could have left it on the Amberana for months if I wanted to, but we wanted to get this video out. So 3 weeks it was. But anyway, as always, thanks so much for watching, guys. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so if you watched, let me start that over again. So we did a basic cider and we finished it 4 different ways. We carbonated it, made it sweet, made it dry, all that kind of stuff.